As you can see, some familiar faces have joined us, but also some new ones. So please let me introduce you to Luis Felipe de Oliveira, who is Director of A.C.I. World, Christina Cassotis, who's Chief Executive of Pittsburgh International Airport, and also with us Thomas Linkenheil, Co-Chief Executive of the United Robotics Group, and also, of course, Fred, Paul, and Thierry are with us. Hello to you all. It's a packed stage, as promised, but it's good to see you all. And Felipe, let me start with you, because I think it's fair to say you work with about 2,000 airports, so you've kind of got an assessment really of what's changing and what airports are worried about right now. And particularly, I'm interested in looking at what the 2030 passenger looks like. What's your assessment of what that passenger will demand in 2030?
Well, first of all, A.C.I. World represents, as you mentioned very well, the 2,000 members around the world. And we have, of course, like the good examples that we have here in the podium, but we also have small airports that is sometimes below the 1 million passengers. And we as an organization need to look at the interests of all the airports around the globe. We work very close with ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization. And basically, these 2,000 airports are in 171 countries and represent around 95% of the global traffic. Basically, when everything we do is try to improve every way that you can improve the passenger journey at our airports. And I think everything was discussed this morning, and I think when I saw as well, talking with the airlines on the other side, is that we need to focus on the passenger, we need to focus on the experience, and technology will play a key role. Of course, different airports, different sizes will have a different approach in terms of technology. How we can work as well on the infrastructure aspects of that, and clear that technology will play a key role, sustainability aspects, and as well how we can finance that as well. So in terms of the global aspects, we have these 3 pillars that you need to work through to reach in 2040 the double of the size of the industry. And the double of the size of the industry doesn't mean that you have the double of the size of the airports or double of the size of the workforce. Again, technology will play a key role to adapt in different levels in different airports around the world.
And that very neatly establishes the things we're going to talk about over the next hour or so here. And Christina, hello, welcome.
Thank you.
When we had a chat, you told me, don't tell me off for quoting you on this, US airports are lazy, bureaucratic, and behind. Strikes me there's a lot of work you guys have got to do.
I stand by that.
What do you mean? Why is it so awful
It's
right
the
now?
governance structure. If you look at how US airports are governed, we are publicly owned, and a lot of the airports in the US are departments of cities, states, counties. Their CEOs don't have contracts. Their workforce is in a pension scheme. So when you bring new ideas to them, they say, how long are you going to be here? So it's very hard to drive transformational change when there's not an incentive. And having worked with airports around the world and seen all the great things that happen in Asia and in the Gulf and in Europe, in Latin America, I think that we have an obligation as US airports, which I'm pretty sure don't ever make a top 20 list for customer service or experience. I'd like to see us do better, and that's what we're working towards in Pittsburgh.
It's a big ask then, given the basis from which you are coming. Where will you start first?
Well, we've already started. I mean, I listen to a lot around technology, and I am a big believer in it. We're, sitting in Pittsburgh, we're the robotics capital of definitely the US. People would say the world, I would argue that. But we are a very big robotics, AI, and automation hub. So I'm all for it, and I think in larger airports, there's a lot of opportunity, in medium-sized airports the same. But at the end of the day, what people want is they want to be taken care of when things go wrong. And technology does not do that necessarily in a way where people will, at a time when they're going to something or returning from something very important, if something goes wrong, they need somebody to speak with. And I feel like we have an opportunity to marry the best of technology with the best of design around service, and we should do that. And I don't think that has to be affected by governance. I think we should all just want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, and Thomas, this is where you come in, because Christina makes the point there about people just needing people sometimes, but you look particularly at robotics, don't you? And you told me that that was about allowing humans to do a better job. How do you get that balance right?
First of all, I think we saw in the example of the Hong Kong airport, a lot of these parts which we have already done and has been done in the industry to automate processes, to make them more smooth, to make them more efficient, to make them more reliable. What we haven't done so far to bring this automation closer to the people, the interaction with humans, and that's what we're coming in. We deliberately targeting these markets where we have need for automation, but in the direct connection with humans. And what we're doing there, we let the machine do what the machine is good in, repetitive tasks, and they let the human and free up time for the humans that they can focus on that what they are good in, is being more in the empathy, more in the high value creating processes, and that they're having the capacity to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the collaboration which we believe will you see further coming down, where we free up capacity from humans to address, to take the processes apart in, let's say, lower value creating processes and higher value creating processes.
And it strikes me it's two things, isn't it? It's about gathering all of the data that we know is in abundance in somewhere like an airport and using that to empower people, your staff. But it's also about freeing them up to do the more creative things, and to Christina's point, the caring things, the people that need that face time. And I suppose it's getting that balance right once again that is quite a difficult thing when we don't know exactly what the future will look like. How do you educate people on that?
Well, you know, first of all, we're coming from the customer journey, from the pain points, and I'm not a stranger to the traveling industry. I'm frequent flyer since 25 years, so I'm going through these processes, and they have been done a lot, right? The check-in process has been fantastically automated, but still you have this part of convenient. You coming in, you try to see where shall I go to? You have busy navigation, then you have these endless lines, and then at the end of all this, someone is going through your personal stuff, which is quite touchy, I think, if someone opens your suitcase and going through that. And standing there in line, I wonder, why must it be like this? You know, we're working very close in lab automation in the medical area, and there's things already automated. We're working together with a big German company. They have automated the imaging of humans, the lung, for example, and an AI algorithm is determine whether you should have treatment or not. That's fully automated, and then this information is seamlessly brought into the workflow of the hospital. And I wonder, why do we have on airports people looking at the screens and try to detect something in my suitcase? Why is it like that? And I think this is what we need to educate, that we need this data, and we can use this data, and I'm convinced that people would like to give data away to have more convenience if they know for what.
Yeah, and they need to see the cost benefit, exactly. And Fred, you touched on sort of the autonomous vehicles. A perfect example there of freeing up those people to do something else rather than just driving vehicles on the airport property. How do you make sure that you are allocating people in the right place?
Actually, by using autonomous vehicle does not mean that you eliminate people altogether. It just change how you manage your fleets in the future. So we are still going to have a control room. So you still need to have highly trained people that are going to look at the whole fleet. So instead of now one vehicle, one driver, we're now able to use one person, maybe handle a fleet of about 12 vehicles.
Yeah.
Now, so that changed the job nature a little bit, but actually still provide some of the best service to both the business partners in the on apron, and eventually also obviously to the passengers, that using the airport too. So I quite agree. I think the technology does not simply just allow us to do something different. It actually enables us to have a different business model. What I think the airport needs to do in the future is to look at how, because of technology, how we are going to manage the airport in a slightly different way. If we are not able to do that, we're simply just replacing a few humans with a few robots. That itself is not going to really make a big impact on how eventually people see airports should be operated. And I think we're in the process of now trying to see whether or not the technology would enable us to have a different way of managing the airport. For example, we are now able to even send agents to hotels, to people's homes, to do the check-ins for them now. So you don't actually have to come to the airport to do that now. We're able to come to you, and then we do the check-in for you, the luggage, everything. So when you go to the airport, you just go straight through. No need to look for your baggage anymore until you reach your destination. So actually, the technology is an enabler, but they are not by itself necessary. It's going to make the airport operation very different unless you change the whole business model altogether.
There is no way my bag would be ready to be collected from home. I would pack too late. Thierry, give me a sense of how airports get this right, because we can clearly see the value, the need, particularly post-pandemic. Automation doesn't fail in the way that humans are susceptible. How do you make sure that those investments are right and we don't succumb to this rush into all technology and then get it wrong later on? How do you plan that now?
Yeah, actually, planning is a tough issue especially today, because changes has become more frequent in our environment. Strong variations in traffic, we have that in the last 3 years. Political decisions, we expect one important political decision in Lisbon regarding the new airport, the strategy of our partner airlines. So to plan for something with efficiency, that means to provide capacity, the right kind of services of airport product for the needs of the airlines is not easy. So the way we do it, for example, for capacity, is not to bet only in infrastructure. It's to improve our operational efficiency, mostly to use the technology, to use biometrics, to use artificial intelligence, to create capacity that is not exclusively with infrastructure, but also with systems. And that's a way to ensure some flexibility. The key word in our industry, to be efficient on a financial standpoint, to provide to the air transportation a good financial equation, competitive financial equation for airlines, for airports, is to be flexible and to be progressive in the investment, and to be able to change the path of things whenever things change around us, basically.
Yeah.
That's the key word for us.
And so, Paul, you're looking at DWC, and you want to build in a bit of flexibility, because we don't know which avenue it's going to go down. We kind of know there's exciting things ahead. We don't quite know where it's going to land. How do you build that flexibility into your master plan?
Well, I can tell you straight off, the mistake we're not going to make is to look at the technology first.
Good.
Right.
Too many companies choose a technical solution and realize that they're looking at it from the wrong end of the process. I mean, if you look at, taxi aggregation apps like Uber and Lyft and Bolt, etc., that's not about booking a taxi. It's actually about creating an efficient network of so many different individual component parts, taxis and drivers, that are aggregated together into a system that is so much more efficient because of the network that's being created. So we are starting at what we're trying to do here, we're trying to create a process in which our capacity and our technology can provide better customer service, higher passenger throughput, more predictability, etc. And then technology fits in component parts to that solution.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can walk into almost any airport in the world and see examples of technology stuck in a corner gathering dust, where someone had the idea. Wouldn't it be great to put a check-in kiosk here, and it's been overtaken by technology which has moved ahead from that. And I think the problem at the moment, we are taking baby steps towards that integrated world in airports, but there are too many individual solutions. There needs to be a holistic solution, and it's all about enabling customer service, not about trying to use an individual technical solution to solve an individual process problem. You know, all of the change that's happened, I think, in business transformation has been an end-to-end solution where, you know, retail has been changed because the whole supply chain and the way that these customer relationship is now managed is completely transformed because the whole process has been turned on its end from start to finish. So we need to look at that within airports, and at the moment there are too many discrete component parts that have individual solutions that when they join together don't actually work.
Yeah, and Felipe, I mean, do you think there's a danger though that we try to come up with this kind of the perfect solution? This is going to work for every airport all around the world. This is what passengers want. And actually, it's going to be a bit messier than that. There's going to be a lot of trial and error. There will be mistakes. There will be bits of kit left by the wayside that were tried and failed. It's not as clean as we'd like it to be, is it?
Well, there is not one solution that fits all the airports in the world. As I mentioned, we have different airports with different needs. We have different governments. We have different restrictions in terms of what kind of technology that we apply. The important is that the technology that today exists and the technology needs to be implemented to cope with the demand.
Yeah.
If we would like to go to double the size of the industry in 40 years, the technology needs to apply in certain ways. But there are different needs that needs to be coped as well. And for me, one of the important things that 93% of our airports in the world are investing more in technology, and this number probably will grow. We have $6.8 billion that are investing in technology this year alone, and probably next year will be even more. And as Paul mentioned, you know, we need to invest in the right technology. How we find a way to right technology, you know, depends on the needs of individual airports,
yeah,
individual governments, and individual needs that a specific location are able to deliver, you know.
And speaking of those different needs, Christina, am I right in saying you have the second oldest population after only Miami?
I think so. In the U.S., we have an aging population. It's a significant percentage of our overall population. And when I listen to all of this, I think, well, okay, how are we taking care of my mother, right? And how are we taking care of all of us in 35 years? So whatever we're going to build in terms of technology or implement, and I like what Paul had to say, it's got to be flexible enough to be changed. And it really has to all be tied to what outcome are we trying to achieve. So at the end of the day, any passenger-facing technology must deliver a passenger service benefit, and that needs to be inclusive. Because if we're only taking care of the day trip business traveler and not the parent with the double-wide stroller or the person in the wheelchair, then we've lost, and we have actually shortchanged our passengers. If we're looking at technology that's going to be enabling our teams behind the walls to take care of that infrastructure, it had better be delivering an enterprise-wide benefit that results in cost savings and people understand how to use it, or they're going to find the workarounds and they're going to go back to the old ways. So I think that when it comes to what we're looking at and where we're going to deploy it, I'm most interested in the outcomes, in the change management process, in the expectations, and in the communication of how we are delivering this at scale, because I think otherwise that's when stuff gets shoved to the side. And I think that we as airports have a responsibility to create the kind of data hubs that allow for all of this technology to speak to each other, right? Because otherwise it sits in silos. So to me, that's going to be the biggest challenge. We're working on it now, but I think that's where you're going to see some airports very challenged.
Yeah.
I agree with Paul about we need to create also solutions eventually. It's going to cover end to end. But at the same time, I also feel that airport is probably in a better position than anybody else in knowing what they need. So sometimes it's very hard to wait for the technology companies to come forward with the right solution for the airport. I think we should take the lead. And we mustn't be afraid sometimes perhaps to make some mistakes. Ultimately, I think if we really want to drive this business transformation, it would have to come from the airport itself, not coming from the solution providers out there.
Agree.
Yeah. I mean, Thomas, and that's what's interesting that you said, you're a frequent flyer, you know airports, you travel through them a lot, but you sort of come to this from a different perspective. And do you look at the industry and say, my God, this is inefficient. The people aren't in the right place. The technology is not being used properly. I could solve these problems, overnight. And we know a lot of this is psychological. It's about overcoming those barriers from both passengers and users, but also the businesses themselves. But do you look at it from an outsider's point of view and say, this could be done so much better?
Yeah, I think so. And I think there shouldn't be a disagreement that we want to create a customer value. That's at the end our way justifies us doing business at the end. If we're not creating value, we have no reason to be here and doing business. However, we have two forces which from our perspective, I'm not an airport expert, but I'm a user of your services. And a lot of things has been, as I mentioned, done really tremendously good. On the other side, there are other processes which are analog. So we have the competition between a digital process, fully automated here, and then we fall into a break, and then you have an analog process, which I think, Paul, you mentioned it in your other speech, where we route everybody through a small point of check-ins or check-outs, a passport control, and so on. And I wonder myself, wait a minute, I have provided this data anyway. I mean, I'm going tomorrow to the US. They know everything from me, but I can guarantee you what happens tomorrow in Charlotte when I land. They will check me again and again and again, and I wonder why. I still have the same biometric passport. I'm still the same person. So this is what I think is the next step of evolution to combine these islands, which are automized, with each other, that you have seamless process throughout. And that we see all over the place in the industry. The other driving force, in my opinion, is not just the technology, the AI, which is rapidly evolving, so that creates a lot of opportunities. The other thing is shortage of skilled labor. I mean, we're working together with some of the areas. This is not a question anymore to replace people. It's actually the question is, can we stay in business? Because we simply don't find them anymore. And I'm sure it's different from parts of the world, but when it comes down to skilled labor, it's really a commodity which is not, which you don't have anymore, just like that.
And when people come to you and ask for your services, what is driving that for automation and robotics? Is it a lack of availability of staff? Is it the cost of staff, good staff? Or is it just that they are genuinely caring about freeing up staff to do other things? Because those are three distinct motivations, aren't they?
Right, and I guess the answer would be it's a little bit of everything, but I think the major driving factor is the lack of skilled labor.
Yeah.
It's the fear, in particular after the pandemic, when it became obvious, where we all ask ourselves, where are all these people? Where in the restaurants, in the airports? I had the pleasure to fly out last year several times from major German airports where they had to strike. And you have 10 lines where you go through the security and just one was open. So how do you deal with that? That's the driving force also in hospitals. They ask themselves, how can we have 24/7 service for diagnostic? If we have a stroke, for example, we are relying on this immediate service. And if you don't have people who are operating laboratories, what do you do then? And I think that's the major driving force. Yes, of course, it needs to be financially sound. It needs to be reliable. But the major driver is how can technology help to balance the shortage of labor? That's the major force which is driving this disruption.
And Felipe, what are airports telling you about their commitment to invest in technology? Because it's been driven by a shortage of labor. We know that, but that has kind of established the ground rules. Do they have the money and the willingness to invest in tech?
Willing, of course, they have. Unfortunately, the airports in most part of the world, 80% of our members work below the green numbers. That's why it's quite difficult to think about that. That's why technology starts to be an opportunity to be more efficient and maybe to go to the green numbers in the future, but also because is a need to do that, in the different levels, but we have a need to do that because at the end, what you need to do is look at the customer experience. And if you have a seamless process, that we allowed the exchange of information, the improvement of our systems, the improvement of the passenger journey, we will have at the end the benefits on the financial side. It's proven that if we increase by 1% the passenger traffic, we increase the non-aeronautical revenues by 0.6, 0.7%. But if we increase the customer satisfaction in 1%, that goes 1.5% in increasing the non-aeronautical revenues. And I think technology will play a key role to help the airports to go, of course, to the positive numbers, and also to have a better customer experience, because that is what we need to do.
And Christina, that's so important because it sounds really obvious, doesn't it? Put the passenger at the center of all your decisions. Of course, everyone would like to do that. You made the point that big stuff happens in airports.
It does.
Good and bad, but it's big stuff. And it surprises me how little that tends to factor into decisions.
Yeah, I think that we talk a lot about efficiency. I don't know how much that really focuses on taking care of people who are going. When people travel, there is something very important at stake for them, very important. You're traveling because you are going to something that matters to you. And when your flight is delayed and there's nobody at the ticket counter, or your bag has not been delivered and there's nobody at the baggage desk, then you come to the airport people, anybody you can grab, and you say, I need this. And when you are told, we can't get you out for 3 more days, you will find that people have already come to a stress level where I'm going to something very important and now I can't get there. That's when people start to fall apart. And I feel like that's not about efficiency, right? You know, the green wave, in German, grüne Welle, right? When you hit all those traffic lights and they're all green and you think, oh my God, I'm gonna make it earlier than I thought to the meeting. When that goes right in travel, everything is awesome. It is so beautiful and we're all so happy. But it doesn't happen all the time. And what are we gonna do when it goes wrong? That's my biggest issue around the technology. My biggest issue around the efficiency is you cannot sacrifice the human element, or you will actually push the system to stress that nobody can manage. And I think that's part of the conversation that we're not having, frankly. And also, how are we getting our own teams to embrace it, understand it, use it, and want it? So those are the things that I'm most concerned about, is what do we do with the infrequent flyers, the people with special needs, the people who don't look like the highest revenue passengers who still want to fly? What's our responsibility there? One note about staffing shortages, we did that right in the US. We actually gave airports, our federal government gave airports money to keep 90% of the staff through the pandemic, so we didn't have any issues staffing back up. And that was an amazing thing that we did as a country, and I'm very grateful for that. So I don't feel like we have the staffing shortages necessarily, because we didn't lose waves and waves of people who don't want to come back to aviation. But yeah, I think that big stuff happens at airports, and we're the gathering place where if people are going to fall apart, it tends to be with us, not on the plane.
Yeah, and the systems need to be in place to catch
Yes.
that. Paul, you want to jump in?
Well, I think actually the fear that you're talking about is very real. And actually, I think if you adopt the system approach that I referred to earlier, and you start with the process and the objectives you're trying to create, actually, I think the solution that you should be coming up with is the technology sits in the background to enable
Agreed.
great customer service to be delivered. I mean, for example, I went through a major North American airport last weekend. It certainly wasn't Pittsburgh or any
Well,
of
we're
the,
not major, but go ahead.
Exactly right. And I needed some help because the signage towards the car rental was absolutely appalling, and it just stopped, and there was no way of knowing. So I thought, I'll find an information desk. Couldn't find an information desk. There wasn't one. Someone might guess where I'm talking about. There'll be a prize at the end if you guess what it is. So I found a kiosk, and the kiosk said, connect to someone to start a chat. I thought, perfect. pressed the button and waited. I got error 404, no such agent available, end. So I was absolutely stuck. So I had to go and find a cleaner who actually told me that I had to get on a particular link tram to another place and got finally to the car rental place about an hour later than I was wanting to. And after a 13-hour flight, anyone got the prize yet? After a 13-hour flight from Dubai, that was not funny. No. Now the thing is, if that airport had thought, right, okay, we're going to have people in times of stress where they've fallen off the system, they need to be recovered. What's the best way? It's not a kiosk where they can go and tap into ChatGPT, but it might be an earpiece in someone's ear when they ask a question, how do I get to the car rental place, that ChatGPT is listening to and can give the answer to the person. So if the person doesn't know, the technology can sit behind the person delivering the service to help them out. Technology needs to enable a greater level of customer service, not attempt to replace it.
But are we forgetting that actually a human at that point would have been quite useful? Someone who can say, this is where it is. And there's this big push to technology, which is amazing, to our point about freeing up
But if the human
labor
is supported by technology to give better customer service, that's the right way round. You know, don't do the bank ATM thing. Go straight to that cashless society that we now live in, where technology is actually the interaction between something we do in the background. It's just a bleep and we're done.
Yeah. It's the pipes and the workings and not the actual end game, isn't it? You want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to bounce on what has just been said. Paul, you're absolutely right. I mean, technology has to be serving the needs of the passenger and not trying to create something that just for the fun of doing technology. But I think we have to have both approaches. You were mentioning that we're doing big stuff. Big stuff happens in airports. We're dealing with flows. It's complicated. We have to provide safety. We have to provide security. We have to provide quality of service. All that in sometimes complicated infrastructure. And the way to do it is obviously sometimes not reinventing the wheels, getting the basics right, having a human-friendly approach to deal with our passengers. But on the other side, it's important not to kill the initiative. And among our innovation teams, airports are fantastic laboratories for innovation, and sometimes smaller solutions pop up. I remember during the time of the COVID, and the time of the COVID, contact between humans was not so promoted, was not so looked after at that time. So our staff invented solutions, for example, to report through technology that gel was missing, that someone was not respecting in the security checks the requirements of COVID and stuff like that. For us to have a quick response. So sometimes it's just small things, small solutions. That when you maintain a spirit of innovation, that you allow people to fail. It was said here, it's very important to allow people to try, to prototype things at a small scale, not at the large scale from the beginning, but try to prototype things and to see if it works, and then to expand if the things work. And we have startups that have been, playing with us in our infrastructure at Lisbon, inventing processes for baggage, for the optimization of the baggage handling system and so on. And now they're expanding, they're offering their services to many airports, showing that it was a success in Lisbon.
Felipe?
One point that I would like to mention as well, because we talk a lot about the airports, what we can do and cannot do. But we need to understand that we are an ecosystem. Certain airports, we have more than 40, 50, sometimes 60 entities that work inside of an airport. That's why this technology could help us to integrate more and work as an ecosystem. Because sometimes we as an airport, we cannot solve all the problems. And if our buildings are constructed to be a flux of people, and this flux is interrupted by one of our partners, that affects the whole ecosystem. but it's not that we will be able to make the right decision or right solution.
Yeah.
That's why the integration, the working together, and the approach that it needs to be done is that technology together with the common approach as an industry will help us in terms of the collaboration to better serve our customers in any case. And I think that we need to continue to push more and more with all the tools that we have internally in the airports, with the technology, and also with our partners.
And Thomas, do you come to the industry, this industry, and get frustrated by what you see? Because you work with all different industries, don't you? And you say, well, we have the technology, here is a solution. And in the airport industry, we're not short of the technology. We have the data. There's a willingness. There are funds for the airports that have deep enough pockets. But it still feels like everything happens in a silo. And we've talked about this time and time again. If you're coming to an organization with an answer, a technological answer, do you get frustrated that it stops there sometimes? Because actually it involves that person talking to that person and sharing a bit of information.
First of all, I think the aviation industry is doing a lot of things very right. So I'm enjoying their service for quite some, and they bring me safe from A to B. It's the safest transportation system in the world. So thank you for you guys, what you're doing. What we see here is, I would think when you go in this area where you try and explore new processes, new technologies, I guess you always have the establishment for some reason or the other, and they're doing the stuff they're doing, and they're in their comfort zone, and they say, well, this is not being our responsibility, you have to go to this guys, then you go to that guys. Let me take an example from the healthcare sector in Europe. We did a survey, we're working together with big hospitals, how they can target the shortage of skilled labor. And the survey showed clearly that over 60% of the people, of the nurses, are actually occupied with paperwork. They're sitting in an office. They're not
60%?
Over 60%. That means they're not spending their time with the patient. They're actually not doing what they're being trained for. They try to make a sense out of information which goes to different kind of authorities, and they are not using the same data as a backbone. They cannot agree even on the data which they would like to provide. Yeah. And I guess this is always, when it comes down to this harmonization of processes, if you have get across different authorities, I think this challenge you have in the airport, but you have it elsewhere. Yeah. What you said, 40-something different kind of organizations. There are 40 boards, 40 MDs, 40 CEOs you have to talk to. And I guess that's the challenge. On the other side, that's the way we look at it from what is technically possible. If I'm not mistaken, you double the passengers until 2040 compared with today. How do you deal with this amount of people coming towards an airport when the system today is already challenged to digest it? Yeah. This is for me, I guess, for you guys, a huge task.
Yeah, and one of those ways, maybe, to use the example you gave, Fred, city centre check-in that you pioneered in Hong Kong. That involves breaking down a lot of barriers. And I know you're going to work on that even more, and that might be one of the solutions to kind of free up space in airports, that maybe in 20 years we'll turn around and go, do you remember when you had a check-in desk in an airport? Great. But that involves a lot of work till we get to that stage, doesn't it?
That's right. And I think we have not talked about the role of the regulators.
Yeah.
Actually, this is a highly regulated industry. And of course, I think as far as the regulators are concerned, they're only concerned about security and safety. And I think sometimes the biggest obstacle is try to convince them that whatever new business model that we're going to come up will not compromise these two, the security and safety. And actually, we talk about the city check-in, and we're now going to expand it across the border to our neighboring province. Again, the first and foremost, we need to convince our regulator that this will not compromise safety and security. Without that, there's no go.
Yeah.
Right. But I think the good thing about what is going on now is that the technology actually is now actually enabling the regulator to be a bit more comfortable in sometimes in us rolling out new things. What I think sometimes we need to do is also don't forget that we mustn't forget that a factor in anything that we're going to roll out should be that we need to make sure the regulators are also comfortable too.
Yeah, Christina?
If you really want to change the business model, we'll let Amazon pick up our luggage at home, right, and distribute it. Because they already know everything about us, and wouldn't I rather have my luggage picked up at home, shipped on Amazon, filled with the sunscreen I need for the vacation that I don't have to buy and worry about leaking all over my bag. There are big, huge transformational changes that are possible, which require Amazon to change its business model, but then we wouldn't all be worrying about baggage systems. And I think that there are lots of things that we can do if we look outside of our industry, which to a lot of people's points here, we are doing. I mean, we have a whole innovation space. We're working with robotics companies all over and with airports and airlines who are testing with us to try to solve issues that airlines and airports aren't necessarily thinking there are technology solutions to, and I think we actually need to really broaden our horizon about what's possible.
And is there enough of that thinking? Because when we spoke, and this is the only other time I'm going to quote you back, you said, I didn't come to run Pittsburgh Airport, I came to change the industry.
Yeah,
I love that.
In the US.
But what does that look like?
It looks like that that it works for passengers, it works for staff, and we can continue to stay flexible and innovate in a way that we don't look like we're just a big box where people get stuck. And I think that we have a huge opportunity. Listen, around the world, things go a lot better than in a lot of airports in the U.S., which there's so many airports I could think of that happened to you at. I don't even know which one to pick. So no point in discussing that. What I mean is the industry in the U.S. I think it needs a radical change in how we think about what's possible, and I think that we need people who are looking up and around, right, as opposed to down and, how do we solve with just what's in front of us? But rather reaching into all of our ecosystems, not just in our industry, but in other industries, to figure out how we can do better, because we can. It really isn't that hard, but you've got to get people in the mindset. It's a mind shift that has to happen, and I think that that's our challenge as leaders.
Paul, you're nodding along.
Yeah, I'm glad Chrissy brought up Amazon, because I think it's an absolutely wonderful example for so many reasons. And one of the things about Amazon is that they are absolutely relentless about speed, reliability, and cost. And they drive down those three things, always in the interest of the consumer. Now, if only airports around the world could take that same approach. But, what keeps me awake at night is when I close my eyes, do I see red crosses? And those red crosses are evidence of poor implementation of technology at airports. We all see the benefit of smart technology with immigration. We all see the need to take what is a fairly ordinary and quite mind-numbing task away from humans and give them to machinery. But why do so many airports implement them so poorly that when you turn up at smart gates, you see the red cross, and 2 or 3 might be open out of 15, the rest are closed, or the whole thing are barriered off with tensor barriers and we can't go through. To me, that is the most disappointing and most stress-inducing moment of any journey. And can I have a show of hands? Am I alone here? How many people get really peed off with closed smart gates? There you go. Big show of hands. Come on, airports, let's do something about that. If you're going to implement technology, make it work and make the commitment to keep it going 24/7.
And it feels like that is a manifestation of an airport saying to a passenger, we don't really care about you. They're not working.
That's right.
We've already taken away all of the manual labor, and actually just fend for yourself. And it puts more and more responsibility onto the passenger rather than onto the airport that is demanding that you show it. I mean, I don't think mine has worked.
Then you add the layer as a British passport holder post-Brexit, where someone has to stamp my passport anyway. Come on, that's 2 steps forward and 4 steps back, is it not?
And Thierry, that's the issue, isn't it, here? That people are more than willing to hand over this information. if they see a benefit for it. To use the Amazon example once again, they know everything about us, and we're okay with that because we see the benefit of doing that. And that's what airports need to get a bit cleverer at.
Yeah, of course, if we are able to offer a benefit to the passengers, I was discussing that with one of the person offering, biometric solutions here in this room. They will be willing, without any problem, to just tick the box and say, I agree to share my data, at least for the moment I'm inside the airport infrastructure, Yeah. But it's so many hurdles with data protection regulation entities to succeed to get to that point that it's we have to fight all together for that goal. Airlines, airports, everybody, and even the border police, because when you were mentioning Red Crosses, I can't sleep because of Red Crosses either. But most of the time, technology is there, but you still need people to oversee the technology. People from the border police, and often the Red Cross are related because to the fact that there is a lack of people behind the technology.
Yeah.
Still, so biometrics is very important. We have a beautiful partnership here in Lisbon with the border police. They're really eager to move forward to find solutions to reduce the hurdles and to make a seamless process for that. And we've succeeded to promote a groundbreaking innovation. We hope to make it to scale it up pretty soon. That's to be able, through biometrics, to do the border control at the gate, at the boarding gate.
Yeah.
So it's a major change in the way we manage our infrastructure, because you can have a space that would be fit for Schengen and non-Schengen passengers.
Yeah. And Thomas, is that the point that actually it's seen as an either-or? And actually at the moment it feels like it needs to be both, that we've taken away the humans too quickly, replaced it with technology, and we don't have that safety net. And actually maybe customers, passengers aren't forgiving because it's not working in the way it should. And that is universal, isn't it? You see, for example, that you can go to a hotel and you can have checked in on an app, have your room key on the app and go up to your room. It frees up the front desk staff to do other stuff. But they could still check you in if they needed to. And the two have to run in conjunction, don't they?
Yeah, in our opinion, definitely. And as I said in the beginning, we're focusing on the repetitive task where humans we don't do repetitive tasks the best. So you find machines who are doing it much better. But that doesn't mean you want to replace humans. You want to keep them for the interaction with humans. You bring them forward. You bring them the opportunity to shine. And that is very important because people, I like the idea of calling at night a chatbot and trying to get your car. This is exactly what happens. It doesn't function, and then you have no one to ask. And that is very frustrating. And I think this we mustn't do. I think we should be smart about where is the human best suited in, and where can he create much more value in the customer journey, and where is technology best suited in.
Yeah.
I don't think we should talk technologies that the technology will solve everything. I think we are too complex for that. And that is where we talked about the elderly people traveling, right? That my mother doesn't know how to operate a smartphone. Right? But the fact is, I'm living in Norway, she could not even jump on the bus because you only can purchase a ticket with a smartphone. Yeah. Is that fair? Question mark, I don't know. So, and that's a small example where I think we should take care of customer groups where we anticipate they don't have access to this kind of capabilities, but then there's a huge amount of processes which is perfectly suited with technology, and that's exactly the way we are going there. Therefore, we have created this concept of cobiotics, like collaboration with humans, but in the technology sector, and that's what we're doing.
I want to touch on what technology means for sustainability as well. We're going to talk a lot more about this in the session this afternoon, but it was interesting, Felipe, you said to me that sustainability is our license to continue to fly. What do you mean by that?
Well, sustainability play an important role in the society today, and the sustainability in the airports is very important, in the aviation sector is very important as well. And we as an airports, we have, for example, certain programs that we are running for more than 12 years, that is airport carbon accreditation, for example, that we are trying to path the way to net zero carbon emissions in the airports by 2050. In our 2,000 members, already 500 members are part of the process in the certain levels of the decarbonization, and we expect that we'll be able to reach the decarbonization by 2050 as an airports in our own activities.
Yeah.
However, if you think about the scope 3 emissions that goes to the airline side, there is a lot of things that needs to be done. We're still producing only 0.1% of the sustainable aviation fuels as you needed. There is some regulations coming through, mandates. I saw Willie Walsh talking about the mandates that certain times is not the right thing to do, but how we can incentivize the production of the sustainable aviation fuels to reach the level of engagement from the governments and the society and the fuel suppliers as well on that way. And if you think about that, we are an ecosystem, we need to help and work together as well. And we as an airports as well, we are looking for that in terms of how we can enable our airports to move in the process that only we are passenger hubs to be like energy hubs as well in the future, how we can be part of the solution on this sustainable approach that we need to have in the future as well. So it's crucial for us. We are enablers in the process, and you need to be together, try to find the right approach to approach the needs to be sustainable in the future.
Yeah. And Christina, I know that's something you're looking at. You want to double your solar panel field. You want to start generating SAF on site in Pittsburgh. I mean, this is big stuff.
Yeah,
but it involves investment now.
Yeah, that's what I mean by change the industry. So we're energy independent, 100%. We built a microgrid and lowered our carbon footprint, saved millions of dollars for utility costs. And we did it through a combination of natural gas that we extract on site and solar. And someday you can fill it with green hydrogen, but at least we have one, right? So I think that there's stuff that can be done right now that is not that hard. We have a lot of acreage and we have pipelines to the river, so we see an opportunity to produce SAF on site, either alcohol to jet or hydrothermal to jet, which is a really interesting thing that we've invested in testing. So we're very determined to be part of what Felipe is talking about, which is earning our right to grow as an industry. I think, I don't know if you all saw the red paint splattered on the front doors, but there were some climate change activists out front a little earlier.
Yep.
And, it doesn't matter that we're a small percentage of the climate impact. Nobody believes that. It's the appearance. And we have to continue to do better together, and talk about it because we have a responsibility to make sure that people feel good and also want to work in this industry. I think those are two things that really are a big deal.
And Paul, I want to ask you about this because it's a big year for Dubai, isn't it? I mean, it's COP28, the big climate summit will take place in Dubai in the oil-rich Gulf. And it's about squaring that circle as well, isn't it? Not only aviation, but where you're based does not have the best record on sustainability.
I think the thing is, look, we all need, as a human race, to take a different view of sustainability. I feel that we're peering into a dark room, and we know there's a monster inside, and no one really wants to go in to fight with it. The thing is, you see, if you look at the problem we've got with carbon emissions, I can draw a parallel here. Over the years, flying has become an incredibly safe mode of transport. I think there's a fatal incident 1 in every 11 million flying hours now. And the reason for that is there's been a global agreement on safety standards, maintenance, aircraft design, innovation, and technology. All of that is embedded in the price of an air ticket. So consumers are paying for that. Now, it's been so efficiently invested that airfares are relatively low and safety is incredibly high. However, if we continue issuing carbon and releasing it back into the atmosphere and destroying the natural habitat the rate we're doing, we are during a period of extinction, and there will be a time in the future when the air will not be breathable. Now, if you take the likelihood of that happening without taking any action as pretty certain, which I believe it is, we need to look right now at how we can make enough of a difference. And I think talking about sustainable aviation fuel, is it 3%, 6%, 30%, as some people think it is? It's all at the margin. We need to understand what 100% of the problem is, work out how much systems and technology investment are going to make as an impact of that 100%, and then look at how we deal with the problem that's left.
Yeah.
And I believe, just like safety, sustainability should be in the supply chain of every single good or service that we consume. We should not be able, and government legislation should stop us from being able to buy things that harm the planet. And until we embed those in the cost of every single good and service we consume, we will not be able to get to the space with the environment that we've got to with safety and regulation across most industries. So at the end, the consumer and governments will have to play a part in mandating and paying for the future of the planet by making all forms of transportation, goods and services across the globe fully sustainable, and those costs need to be embedded in the supply chain. It's got to happen.
Yeah. I mean, and Fred, has that message got through yet?
Well, we are fully committed to carbon zero by 2050. I think sustainability, sometimes people are worried about that this might mean additional costs. Just look at why I suppose that's this fear that's driving a rollback by the British government. But I think this might also be an opportunity to implement some new business models, which might be able to achieve both. For example, at my airport, we're now able to pool all the ground equipment. So in the past, we have a few suppliers. Obviously, none of them can really be able to service the entire airport, but when you put them all together, it's more than enough. So what we have now done is to put them all together and then try to lease it out to them. Now that's one way to reduce carbon footprint and at the same time be able to save some money too. So I think, again, if we approach this in a smart way, I don't think that necessarily means an additional cost to the business.
Yeah, yeah, and Thierry, that's the issue, isn't it? No one wants to see it as an additional cost, but actually it is an additional cost because up until now it's been the environment that's paid the price.
Right.
For example, a ton of SAF today is worth 3.8 thousand euros when a ton of Jet A1 is 800 euros. So yes, of course, there's an issue of cost. We are all worried about the effect of the regulation on the cost of transportation will be. The Fit for 55 package has been voted in the European Parliament. That means that there will be an increasing proportion of SAFs into the mix of fuel that will be used by the aircraft. There will be the end of the carbon credit. This will turn aviation more expensive, probably. So the challenge for us is that this cost could be reduced by scaling up the production of SAF. That's very important. That's very important. But I'm quite optimistic because I see things moving everywhere. Here in Portugal, there was 2 days ago a 630 million euros project announced for SAFs. Our company, Vinci, has created a 1.5 billion euro investment fund for H2 projects. So I think there is a real awareness of the challenges here, and people are getting aligned to face these challenges.
And Thomas, just a final thought from you. Looking ahead, how do you design sustainability? How do you build sustainability?
In our product or in the connection with the...
Generally, yeah.
Well, I mean, what we're addressing is that we start recycling the robots. A robot, every mobile robot has a battery. That's by default. It cannot be hooked at a grid. So, and we entirely have established a kind of a recycling process for recycling these parts, in particular the battery. When it comes down to sustainability, the energy use for the servers, that's more a global issue, because the servers, when we see the consumption of ChatGPT for energy consumption, that's a different kind of animal to treat. But when it comes down to our products, we are fully recyclable.
Thank you all. We've only just touched on it, but in the session this afternoon about 3:30, we're going to talk so much more about innovation and sustainability and how the two go hand in hand, and whether you really can have airport and green in the same sentence. So for now, thank you so much. Please thank the panel who've been with us today. It's been fantastic to have you with us. To Thierry, Paul, Fred, Thomas, Christina, and Luis Felipe, thank you so much. Really nice to see you all.